There's an invention I'd really like to see called a Google Parrot. At least that's what I'd call it if I was inventing it. And before I tell you what it is, or before I try to describe it, I'll just say a little bit about the sources of ideas, where they come from, for me at least. The first is an episode of The Office, hysterical TV show. And it's this episode of The Office. There's a guy who comes to work at Wernham Hogg, the paper company that The Office series is set in, and he's like a university graduate maybe, or else he's in his final year of university, something like that. He's smart anyway. And he's in a conversation with David Brent, this really pretentious office manager. And they're talking about, I don't know how the conversation gets around there, but they're talking about Dostoevsky. And halfway through the conversation, well, several times during the conversation actually, David Brent makes excuses to break off the conversation, go into his office for a minute or two, then come back and continue. And of course what he's doing is that he's going into his office, doing a Google search on Dostoevsky, and then coming back and continuing as if it's his information really, as if he knows this stuff. So there's something there about the relationship between what you know and what you have access to, which I think is really interesting. The second influence on this Google Parrot idea is an artwork I saw at a European festival a few years ago. I took a bunch of my students to Berlin, to a media festival called Transmediale. And a lot of it wasn't very good, but there was one artwork which was quite interesting. There was a piece called Human Browser. Very simple. It's this woman walking around with some wearable computing stuff, part of which was a set of earphones and a microphone built into her front of her outfit here. And how it worked is that while she was walking around, the microphone was picking up conversations around her, sending it wirelessly to a computer, where that spoken text was translated into written text. That written text was uploaded to Google as a Google search, and then whatever was returned from that search was sampled. The text was turned back into spoken text and was relayed to her what's it called? The earphones that she was wearing. And then she would speak aloud whatever was coming through her earphones. So she was hearing something, like if you said something to ask her a question, it would go through this complex Google searching process, be turned back into sound for her to hear, and she would narrate what she heard. Brilliant, it's brilliant. It's very entertaining, because you never knew what you were going to get, and some of it was very pornographic. It's really funny. So what's a Google Parrot come out of that? A Google Parrot, this is just an imaginary thing, it's something that sits on your shoulder like this. It's like a parrot, because it's funny. But it has some of the same technology that was in this Human Browser piece. That all the time you're speaking yourself, or you're walking through the world listening to things, it's sampling the sounds that it's hearing, particularly the sound of your voice, the person who's wearing this parrot. And it's sending it off on its Google search, bringing back lots of text, turning it back into sound again, and it's murmuring this text all the time. I'm probably murmuring more than one stream of text. It's probably murmuring 4 or 5 different streams of text in slightly different voices, possibly. So all the time you're speaking, all the time you're in a conversation with somebody, there's this murmuring going on in your ear, which is kind of related to what you're talking about. It's because the parrot's hearing what you're saying, and it's Google searching it and presenting information related to it. And some of it is very quiet. It's all sotto voce, this stuff, so you can barely hear it. But of course, when you hear something that is relevant, just like when you're at a cocktail party and you hear your own name spoken above the murmur of the crowd, when you hear something that's relevant, you can kind of tune into it. And you tune into it by sort of moving your head like this, as if you're listening. And there's a kind of proximity sensor, or maybe an accelerometer or something in the parrot, which can detect you doing this, and responds to your head movements by tuning into one of these streams of Google search data and presenting it louder, whispering it slightly louder in your ear. And you can incorporate that into your own text. So as you're speaking, you can incorporate the things you're hearing in the way that Human Browser speaks the text that's coming from Google. I think the second update on the Google Parrot, we'll probably get rid of this visual parrot. You'll probably make it an implant. You'll probably just get it implanted somewhere in your shoulder here, something like that. It would do all the same stuff, but it wouldn't be visible from the outside. You'd still hear this murmuring sound just on the edge of your hearing, and you can still kind of tune into it by moving your neck and kind of listening and speaking it. I think after wearing one of those for a while, or maybe after the third and fourth instantiation, when people are completely used to these things, you'd stop thinking this is an external voice at all, and you stop realizing you are hearing Google text and quoting Google text. It'd probably just feel like you, actually. It'd probably be your ideas, just as David Brent claimed Dostoevsky's for his own. You would feel as if it was knowledge that you possessed, even though it's not knowledge that exists inside your head, it's knowledge that exists outside on the servers of Google somewhere.